Get more confidence. Get that promotion. Get moving up the corporate ladder. Get a better gig with an MBA from Mays Business School at Texas A&M University. Whether you're starting out or stepping up, now you can take your career to a whole new level with a full-time MBA in College Station and convenient weekend options at Houston City Center. Texas A&M has a program to suit your schedule. Visit mba.tamu.edu. And Giga Maggie.
Howdy, welcome to Mays MasterCast. I'm Shannon Deere, the Associate Dean for Undergraduate Programs, here with your sunny host, Ben Wiggins.
Oh, thanks. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I am feeling sunny today.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. It's a beautiful day in Aggieland. Not to steal your line, but it is.
No, I love it. That's a good riff on it, and it is a beautiful day in Aggieland.
Yeah. How are you?
Doing all right. Brielle was a little sick this weekend, so we had to take her to urgent care, but she's okay now.
That sounds like not a little sick.
I think it was peace of mind as much as anything. She's fine. And
to be clear, not COVID.
Yes, she tested negative for COVID. Okay. She does not have COVID and also does not have the flu.
Good. I'm glad. Well, hopefully it's just some cold and she will be fine soon.
Yes.
Back to herself.
Oh, I mean, she's back. She's doing all right today.
She's doing somersaults in the living room and
usual sassy self.
Nice. All right, good. I'm glad to hear it. So today on the show, we have Rogelio Oliva. Dr. Oliva is the Robin L. 89 and Alan B. Roberts 78 Chair in Business in the Department of Information and Operations Management at our business school. He has served as an adjunct professor at MIT's Zaragoza Logistics Center and has been a research affiliate at MIT Center for Transportation and Logistics. His research is really interesting in that it explores how behavioral and social aspects of an organization interact with its technical components to determine the firm's operational performance. He talks a lot about that in the episode, this blending of kind of psychology and efficiency within business. He's also one of our best professors in the business school and specifically the MBA program. He teaches a course in operations management for the MBA program, and he's received many teaching awards, but I always think he's kind of the rite of passage. Like, you need his course to really feel like you got an MBA, and he teaches it mostly case-based and just really challenges students. He talks about it in the episodes, but challenges students to really think versus just transferring information to them. And I appreciate that certainly about Professor Oliva. He grew up in Mexico, talks about that in the episode, and then went through his education there, got several different degrees, including a Ph.D. from MIT. So that is kind of explains his connection to MIT. So we hope you enjoy the episode with Rogelio Oliva.
He's a fascinating guy.
A gem of a human.
I really enjoyed the discussion. Yeah. Hope you enjoyed as much as we did. Let's get into it. We welcome Rogelio Oliva to the show. How are you doing?
Doing very well. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us. What is your favorite superpower?
There's a character in Isaac Asimov's Foundation trilogy. The character name is the Mule, but he has the telepathic ability to influence people's emotions. And I thought that was really cool. If you could just influence how people feel about things, I think you can do pretty much whatever you want. I think it would be great just to, dose up a little bit of empathy, a little bit of acceptance, and we could have great conversations. So I think that would be just a terrific superpower.
That's a fantastic superpower. And we've never had an answer like that before. We've had telepathy, we've had, influence people's thoughts, but we've never had influence people's emotions. I love that. So what's the first thing that you would do? If you're walking down the street, suddenly, boom, you have this power. What do you do with it? What's the first thing?
Like I said, I think empathy would be the first thing that I would try to spread out or give people a grasp of. If we could see our human fellows in be a little bit on their shoes and understand where they're coming from, and remove all those judgments, barriers that we have. I think that would just change the way we drive, change the way we talk, change the way we do everything. So I think it would be pretty influential.
Yeah, I love that. You are a person who's had a chance to be in a lot of different shoes during the course of your life. Tell our listeners a little bit about where and how you grew up.
So I was brought up in a bicultural home in almost rural Mexico, not quite. It was a small town, 20,000 people by the time I was growing up. Sugarcane and cattle were the main states in there. Stayed there until I was 16, then had to move out of my hometown to go to high school, finish high school in the state capital. Did my undergraduate degree in Mexico. In that process, when I was 12, my mother is American. She never spoke English at home because my father didn't understand English. And she didn't feel it was fair for us to have a language that he couldn't understand. But when we were 12, myself and my siblings, we were all sent to spend a year here in the States. And I lived for a year in northwestern Ohio. That's where I learned my English. And then went back to Mexico and stayed there through college, basically.
Okay. What was so once you finished college, what was your first job?
After finishing college, I worked in a steel foundry, a very small steel foundry, about 150 to 200 employees. And I was first brought in to help schedule production. That was a bit of a challenge. I was systems manager, I think that was the title of that at the time. I never had that many people under my direct reporting line, but at the end of the day, it was my schedule that drove the whole plan. So it was pretty daunting when you're 22, 23, trying to figure that out.
Sure, I'm having flashbacks to your operations management class, thinking, okay, we're reading a Harvard Business Review case and thinking, okay, what does Rogelio do now?
That's a lot of the experience of what we're trying to convey in every class. It's that sense of you need to take action. You need to process the partial information that you have. So yeah, that's about it.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about your postgraduate education.
So the biggest challenge on that job that I was describing in the foundry was that my first degree is in industrial and systems engineering. So I went in, tried to schedule things and so on. And what you realize, or what I began to run into very quickly, it's this thing in organizations that seem to get in the way of all the formulas and equations that they taught me in my production management classes. And these are people. Yeah. And it turns out that, influencing people, back to our superpower, it's one of the most challenging things there is. I always knew that I wanted to do a master's. I wasn't sure what the master was going to be in. So I ended up doing a master's degree in basically sociology and psychology applied to business. Huh. And I did that in the United Kingdom and University of Lancaster. Yeah. I did that with money from the Mexican government. The easiest way to pay it back was to go back to Mexico and teach at a university. I went back to my alma mater, Monterrey Tech, and I just fell in love with academic life. I thought this was way too much fun. And 2 years later, I was applying to my Ph.D. at MIT. The major is in operations management. My minor is in behavioral science. So I'm a sort of a quirky duck in that sense, that I care about efficiency and throughput, but I really care about how people feel and develop through their jobs and through their relationships that they carry on the systems that they're embedded in.
And as an educator, one of your philosophical cornerstones, you and I have talked about the difference between skill development and information transfer. You've said about this crucial distinction as an educator that the classroom must be flipped. Those are the words you've used. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, I think in this day and age, back in the Middle Ages when books were rare and information transfer was difficult, learning to read and having access to that information was sort of the bottleneck in the formation of an individual.
Yeah.
On the internet, and we have more information that should be around, there's some degree of censoring that should be going out there. But access to information is not the problem. You don't know something, you Google it. You don't know something more specific, you go to Wikipedia and you have access to it. And this is something that we're all, I'm of an age that I had to grow up and develop those skills. Most of the students that are coming into my classroom do this as naturally as breathing. So clearly, the MBA experience, and this hasn't been true for 20 years, but the focus on information transfer, I basically have toned it down significantly, and I have the confidence that you guys, my students, know how to do this. You can Google it, you can look it up, you can talk to your peers, you can do whatever. What it's important is what you do with that information. How do you process that information? How do you begin to have influence and so on? So to me, the MBA education should be about those skills that you need to recognize relevant information, decide what is relevant information, collect it, process it, and then use it in a way that you can begin to influence people. And that's what I try to enact in every single class is, okay, here's a limited boundary of knowledge. It's messy. It's not structured. You need to cope with it. And chances are you will not have a chance to process the whole thing into 3 hours. But give the same information to 60 individuals or 40 individuals, and we can process all that information in a structured way. And that's how you get the insights.
In terms of being able to develop these skills and sort of pushing your, as a student, pushing your educational boundaries and so forth, do you think that a bicultural background like yours is a significant advantage in that respect?
It has clearly influenced the way I tackle problems and I understand problems. And to a certain degree, most of my students won't think of me as being one of the most empathic persons or caring, that the social dimension, it's important to me, but the challenge in a classroom environment is to challenge you. I need to take you to the next stage, and that means I need to put you in a difficult spot. You
Yes.
need to process and wiggle your way out of that spot. Coming back to the question of does it have an advantage? I think it does an advantage in the way you are allowed or your brain works to structure or understand a problem.
Yeah.
And one element is cultural, but there are simple elements. For instance, the word trade-off does not exist in Spanish.
Oh.
You can come up with the idea of trade-off and you can describe it, but it takes 1 or 2 sentences.
Yeah.
The cost benefit that comes from allocating efforts, but it's not a portable idea.
Yeah.
So when you're thinking about a problem and suddenly, you change from Spanish to English and say, well, there's a trade-off, it's bingo. That little word allowed to unpack the problem in a way that would have taken 2 or 3 different stages to do in Spanish. And when it comes to the emotional world, when it comes to different domains, I find Spanish to be much more powerful, or to give me more granularity in the concepts that I'm using to talk and define the problems, that allows to open up the problem space. So yeah, I think having that duality is definitely a plus. I mean, I don't think you need the biculturalism. You can develop that by just reading and understanding. I'm a big fan of reading biographies, so it's just, if somebody took the trouble to write a biography about someone, it's because it's really influential and it had access to certain things or certain information and process it in a certain way. And I'm just fascinated by how people, extraordinary people, cope with those things and process that information.
So you mentioned flipping an example of flipping from Spanish to English. What's an example of going the other way?
They're domains, let me put it that way, that I don't know whether it's because that's how I develop them, that are more, that the vocabulary that I have, the distinctions that I have are richer in Spanish. So when it comes to political issues or power struggles and things like that,
Yeah.
It does not hurt to think like a Central America dictator sometimes too. I'm kidding. But it's just having the language to describe what are the unintended consequences and how people are trying to manipulate. I find myself, the Spanish language is a lot richer and allows me to see things that I don't see in English. I'm sure I could remedy that if I read more Shakespeare or something like that. But it was not part of my upbringing. So I learned politics or office politics in Mexico, and that's something that I have to decode back to that basic language for me. Just all the research shows that you can only do arithmetic, not math, arithmetic in your mother tongue.
Oh.
And I know the multiplication tables in English, but if I have to count by three by three, I flip into Spanish automatically. It's just that's how the pathways are trained in the brain. So,
interesting stuff. Do you think so? We talk a lot about the global mindset at Mays, and in classes during the MBA program, we would talk about how the cultural differences would often impact the way the problem was being addressed, even within the case. Do you think that cultural disconnect is diminished for those who were raised multicultural? Which is to say, do you think that it is easy to add a third or fourth culture rather than adding a second?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the difficult part of adding the second one is discovering that there's such a thing as having a second culture.
Right.
A good friend of mine likes to say, you don't know what being Mexican is until you live outside of Mexico.
Yeah.
And then you realize, wait a minute, we do things differently in my town. Why do we do them? Because, everybody I grew up with was doing the same things, and that was the definition. Once you realize that there's a new way or there's a different way to accept it, you spend the time and recognize it and acknowledge it and assimilate it and so on. So, and that, I don't think that's an easy transition. That breakthrough, I think you can talk intellectually about it, but to be able to, in the middle of a conversation or as you're working through things, to come up and snap out of it and say, this is a culture shock moment. Let me step back. That the first time to do it, I think it's not trivial. If you've done it once, I think it's a lot easier to do it over and over.
Sure. And it sounds like the challenge may lie in figuring out which of your assumptions, which of your postulations are actually fluid and which ones really are, no, this is just the way the world is. This is the way the world is everywhere. For example, gravity, is the same everywhere. Right. Like water is wet everywhere. Right. But many things, and that's those are, obvious extreme examples, but there are some things that are really, the same across certain very basic things about human life that are more or less the same everywhere.
I mean, I one of the aha moments that I remember, I must have been 7 or 8 when this biculturalism began to dawn on me.
Yeah.
I mean, my parents are getting ready to go to dinner with the candidate for the presidency of Mexico. The candidate comes into my hometown. My parents got invited to the dinner.
Yeah.
My father, it's all going crazy. The suit is going out.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. And it's like, the future president in Mexico at the time, once you were from a certain party, it was certainty that you were going to be the next president. And my father is, Mr. President, the president, my mother just turns around and says, no, he's just a guy. What do you mean? No, but he has been chosen. He's going to be the next president. Yeah, no, he's going to be the president, but he's just a guy. This is a democratic process. We're all equal. Blah, blah. I mean, clearly American values coming through across. And I'm this is my first aha. It's like, wait, this is a disconnect here. How do I process this?
Yeah.
And once you start unpacking that, you realize that a lot about how I was brought up was in that confrontation of not confrontation, but that give and take between the two cultures. I remember going to my friend's house, being male, and they would sit down and they would be served by their mothers and their sisters and the maids and everything, because that's the way it is in Mexico. Not at home. At home, I woke up, I had to make my bed, I would set up the table, I would have to wash the dishes just like my sister or whatever. This, again, it's my mother coming across. So, stupid little examples, but this is what gives you a sense of this is not a standard experience, if you will. I'm having access to something richer here.
Yes. Moving forward to your teaching process now, in terms of how we've dealt with COVID, what are the most important things you've learned from the hybrid process?
There's two components to it. The first one is that it works. It is possible. Universities have been asking us to move to online education for a number of years, and the faculty universal response is, no, I need to interact with my students. They need to see it. They need to live with it, blah, blah. Well, come March 2020 is you don't have that option. Figure it out.
Yeah.
It turns out that you can do it. So all that resistance that we were grumbling about and so on, it's not there. The process changes. There's no question about that. You have to take certain things. And this was the first time I was doing this, and I decided to do a full-blown experiment. I said, I'm going to try to maintain the class as much as it was my regular class, heavy interaction, class participation. And if it blows up in the process, well, I would have learned, coded, and figure out how to resolve it. Yep. Interesting enough, so if you had asked me in September, is this going to work? I would honestly have said, I have no idea. I'm going to give it my best.
Right.
6 weeks into it, I thought their students are getting the same quality of exchange and information and the development of skills and so on. So that I think, to me, that's lesson number one. It can be done. There's adjustments that you need to do, and part of teaching this semester was learning, and some things are the things that I can do in the classroom or I can do in the hybrid environment to make it more fluid and things like that. But it's also, it came very clear to me that there's an important distinction about the student that can succeed in the distant learning environment and the student that needs the social system that we have created with classroom peers, teamwork, peer pressure, mentoring, all of that. And there are students that are self-motivated, disciplined, brilliant, that can succeed in this environment. There are students, and I'm not saying that they're weaker, they just need those social engagements to become present in the exchange. And if you're sitting in your living room at home and you don't have that kind of commitment, you're going to be distracted by your dog, your kid, the delivery man. I feel like a cup of coffee, or start balancing your checkbook. It's very easy to be distracted once you're in Zoom. So I would say if we can figure out whether the student has what it takes to survive by being I don't want to call it a loner, but a zoomer, somebody that would strive by itself, or is this a person that would benefit from the social environment and needs to come to campus and have those exchanges? So to me, those are the main two lessons.
That's me, by the way. I needed the social interaction. I needed the learning environment. I am grateful that this did not occur during the time my cohort had in the program, because I would not have done well with this. in the process of figuring it out, you talked about how you would have you had no idea whether it would work. And one of your favorite phrases is be comfortable being confused. This, though, stands in opposition to what you've also described as a knee-jerk reaction to action. So, first of all, you talked about how there were some changes that you needed to make in terms of dealing with the virtual environments. What were those?
So there were a couple of things, and so in my side, I find myself having to do a checklist, just like a pilot before taking off. And I'm sure you and your production manager have this because there's a lot of moving parts. That was not the case before. I would walk with my case in my hand. Everything I needed was in my head, and I can go. Now is, you need to turn on the microphone, turn on the transcription, do this, do that. Things fell through the cracks for the first 2-3 weeks. And it's halfway through the class that students are telling me, you haven't done this, we're not working with that. So it was that, I started the class by saying, I don't know what we're doing. We're going to figure this out. I need your help. The students at that point have at least one semester more of experience than I have. And it's very easy to walk out of class saying, oh, it was frustrating, the technology wasn't there, and so on. But the attitude had to be and was, okay, what do I do so it doesn't happen again? Or I still have this challenge. I asked this question and the class went quiet. That in the classroom, I would twist the question this way and I would force people to react. And I can't do it effectively here. So you start, you just log all those different challenges and say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to try this and tomorrow I'm going to try that. So it's that continuous experimentation that you're doing. Throughout that process, you're absolutely right. Something didn't go as expected. The natural reaction was, let me do more of my old solution. Pushing into what should work.
Right.
And then it's not until after class, and this is something that I do after every single class. I spend about 20 minutes debriefing it and said what worked, what didn't work. And I write myself notes because I'm not saying that case until next year. So right. I want to write down everything that I learned today. So when I open up my file next year, it's like, oh yeah, I remember this. I figured that out. And it's normally on that post hoc evaluation that I figure out, I did this. I pushed in the same direction. I still don't know how to do that, but don't push in that direction. At least I learned that much. Let me figure out what the alternatives are. So I honestly, I think, how do you fight that instinct? I think that the knee-jerk reaction to action comes out of a certainty that you know what's going on. At least that's the only way I feel comfortable to reacting. But I think the challenge is to recognize early, oh, this is not working, or this is being counterproductive. And then once you acknowledge that, then you're allowing yourself the time and the space to be confused and say, okay, there's something new here. I don't know. How can I diagnose it? How can I test it? How can I do that? But honestly, it often comes from failure. And hopefully what you want to do is to make that failure small. I ruin a 5-minute interaction with a student, not a full class, not a full semester. It's constantly adjusting. So I think that's what I'm looking for.
You also, in terms of, you work with businesses on their organizational change initiatives. How have those relationships and that work informed your teaching approach or your research approach?
So my research is that. My research is what we're calling now behavioral operations.
Yeah.
How is it that psychological and sociological elements of the system, whether it's human groups, individuals, organizations, affect the, quote, productive capacity or the production capacity. And I was trained as an industrial engineer. And if you ask me, how do we optimize inventory? How do we balance a line? I can do that, not with my eyes closed, but it's trivial. If you ask a psychologist, how do you design a group, an effective team? I'm not saying it's easy, but it's relatively simple. Now what you're doing is you're asking people that have those social and psychological needs to, on top of that, be efficient, maximize that output, deliver a product, keep the customer happy. So you're putting a lot of tension into the social system, or you're putting a lot of pressure, technical and economical pressure into the system. And the alternative is you're bringing fallible humans into your production and economic system. And of course, the economists assume perfect rationality. Industrial engineers assume perfect robots. And the moment you start recognizing that that's not the case, that's when things get really interesting. So that's my research. That's exactly what I try to live in class. In class is we have these technical concepts. Again, I work with the premise that the technical concepts are easy to grasp. We can Google them, Wikipedia, blah, blah, blah. You know how you feel. We're very good at reading each other. Is now, how do we figure out, how do we make decisions as a collective? Here are the frameworks to make the decision. Here's how different people in the decision-making process feel about it. Let's accommodate that. Yeah. And that's what I try to enact in the classroom every day.
Okay, and that is the flipping of the classroom. We're reading each other, and now we have to make decisions as a collective. That's what you were talking about.
Right. My goal is to have you experience that collective decision making and that accommodation process. That's how we make decisions in business. The lone CEO in the top of the tower, it doesn't exist. Right. Decisions are made by teams, group of experts. The guy with the biggest spreadsheet wins the meeting. How do you accommodate all that stuff and have different perspectives, different points of view, different concerns brought to the table, and to be able to talk openly about it. I love the operations management class because the goals of operations are very easy to agree with. We want more output, more quality, more margin. It's straightforward. What is not straightforward is that by pressuring quality too much, you're sacrificing the well-being of your employees, or the customer could, whatever. And so it allows for that distinction to play out a lot better, I think.
Well, this approach has worked very well for you. You've won a number of teaching awards in addition to research awards. Which one means the most to you?
I would have to say it was the first one, and this was an award that I was given in Mexico at that time. I was teaching seniors in college. That's 21, 22, and I was 25, 26. And to recognize that was what sort of opened up this notion that, I don't suck at this. I can do this. And I feel passionate about it, and so on. And I think that's what sent me in the path of trying to improve. My teaching style, my teaching concerns have changed dramatically from class to class. But I think that first one is like, okay, at least I know what I'm doing. And that was awarding on itself.
Fantastic. Let's move to some rapid fire. What have you recently tried to teach yourself?
I'm a researcher. Every single paper that I write is something new. It has to be interesting. I don't like to write the same paper twice. So that is always an ongoing conversation. So the lockdown was ridiculously productive for me. I never had all my co-authors locked down as concerned of writing papers as I was. So that was a very good period. We managed to go through that. But honestly, the experience with the hybrid teaching was everything else went into the background, and I have to give it 100% to what's going on. Every class was an experiment. Every class was a a trial of something, a diffusal or something. And even I remember when I was learning to teach by the case method. The first semester it was every class it's a turmoil. It's completely draining and everything. At the end of the first semester, it's okay, that got done. But it wasn't until the third time that I taught a course, so 3 semesters, that I was able to say at the end of the semester, okay, that didn't suck. I found a way to make this effective and so on. I see myself in that learning curve with the hybrid method. I think we made tremendous progress, but I hope we don't have to. But if need be, I think there's a lot to be improved over the next 2 or 3 iterations before we flatten out. So that was challenging, and like I said, it took pretty much every waking moment to be thinking, to be redesigning, to be challenging my old assumptions and everything.
What is the book you've given most often as a gift?
That is a very interesting question. I had a chuckle when I read it. And in raw numbers, I would have to say that is Goodnight Moon, the kids' book.
Oh, yeah.
I've been teaching MBAs for 20 odd years. Students are between 24, 26, and 35. The number of babies that have been born while I've been teaching, normally the father, it's very rare to have a mother delivery in the middle of the semester, but and different cohorts have different attitudes about sharing that information and so on. But if I had found out that one of my students was having a baby and so on, I made a big deal out of it. We get pictures in the screen, and they get a gift. And what is the gift that a professor should give a baby? And it's a book. And Goodnight Moon it was one of my kids' favorites. So I know it's a little early for a newborn, but I felt that this is a gift that a professor should be giving. So I've probably given that a dozen times, probably a little more, baby per semester. More recently, my grown-up gift, if you will, has been Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow.
Oh, yeah.
I just think that's just a fascinating book, and it captures a lot of what I'm interested in, the research that I'm doing, and so on. So I think those are. But I don't think I've given as many Thinking Fast and Slow as Goodnight Moon.
Yes, Goodnight Moon. I realized the other day. So we've read Goodnight Moon to Brielle a fair bit, but Margaret Wise Brown, who wrote Goodnight Moon, also wrote The Runaway Bunny, which my mom read to me when I was a kid, and I realized we've never purchased The Runaway Bunny. So at some point, I'm going to get that one.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, if you have small children, you know what comfort that book seems to give. The repetition, and you read it for every night. For what, 2 years? No, probably not that long. It's a good gift.
Good night clocks and good night socks. We here end our session with some good bull. Do you have anybody you would like to send good bull?
I would have to say the classes of 21 and 22 in the MBA collectively. I taught the class of 21 on a normal schedule and everything. Their world got turned upside down in the middle of the second year, going into internships, trying to get an internship, going into the job search and all of that. It hasn't been easy. I have 3 kids basically on the job market of that age, and these are tough times. So I think they've done tremendously well. I mean, it speaks to the flexibility and caliber of people that we take into the program. The class of 22, they are training their teachers on how to teach with this method. So I'm very, very grateful for their patience and their flexibility. I see learners in most of them and saying, okay, we're going to figure this out. It's not going to be perfect. There's things that I need to compensate. So kudos to our students and in this difficult times. I think they've done tremendously.
Good bull to them. And good bull to you. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Oliva. We really appreciate the time. I really appreciate the time.
It's been my pleasure, Ben. Thank you so much for doing this, and best of luck. Best of for 2021.
Thank you so much, and the same to you.
We hope you found Rogelio's episode insightful. For our MasterCast top 3 takeaways, I wanted to start with his superpower of controlling emotions. When he first said that, I thought,
life is good, but it can be better.
Well, what is that from?
It's from the second Wonder Woman movie.
Oh.
Pedro Pascal says that's his TV pitch, but he ends up being the villain. So,
well, thanks for the spoiler.
I mean,
I heard it wasn't
not
good.
That great. No, it's not that good.
Yeah.
It's basically a 2-hour 80s joke.
Okay. Well, I like that. I mean, I can hang with that. I'm watching Cobra Kai, which is basically like a 3-season 80s joke. All that to say, he talked about controlling emotions. And when he first said that, I thought, of course you would want to control emotions for good. You would want people to have good feelings. And then I thought, no, our bad emotions sometimes are very important. And there would be times where even if you were being manipulative, because you would be manipulating people's emotions, even if you're manipulating them for good reasons, there would be times when people would need to have negative emotions about something to create a positive good. And I just hadn't really thought about that before.
That's true. I think one of the most important statements I've ever heard in life is your emotions are never wrong.
Mm-hmm.
What you do with your emotions can be wrong, but what you're feeling at any given moment, it's always right at some level because it is you. It's an expression of you and where you are in that moment in your life. And I think if we as a species honored those things a little bit more and stopped stigmatizing certain ways of feeling in certain situations, life would be better.
Yeah.
Life will be better when we stop doing that.
Yeah, that's a good point. For our second takeaway, I loved what Rogelio said about, you asked him about how if it was easier to add a third and fourth culture into your life than it was to add a second.
Yeah.
And he said the difficulty of adding a second culture was just realizing there is a second culture. And I thought that was so wise, that's the hardest part, is knowing that there's something else that exists. And then it's much easier to add other perspectives or to assimilate into other cultures once you've done it the first time.
Yeah. And we touched briefly on the idea that there are certain things that are kind of human immutable and that are kind of the same across all cultures. There are certain things that just don't change.
Right.
But that list isn't as long as you might think.
Yeah.
And kind of knowing which things to be prepared to call into question when you cross cultural lines, that's a skill that I don't know if you can duplicate any other way than by being present in another culture.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to think about or to even see those differences starting to erode with social media. Not entirely. There certainly are still there, but the lines have blurred a little bit more. And I think will continue to blur more. And that's kind of sad in some ways because you're losing some of those differences, but certainly they're still there. And like you said, the list of things that can be assumed to be the same is pretty small.
Well, the hope when those lines start to get blurred is that you get to keep the best parts of everything. In reality, it's probably just the biggest and most visible cultures kind of drown out the other ones.
Yeah.
Like everybody wants a piece of like kind of the Hollywood pie, so to speak. And there's some things about LA and Hollywood that are amazing and some things that are not very good at all. But that's how it goes.
Yeah, for sure. For our last MasterCast top 3 takeaway, I actually have 2 takeaways. And I don't know which one I want to do. So we're just going to do both of them. And
yeah, executive decisions.
The first one
from our associate dean. Gig 'em.
The associate dean of podcasting.
Right.
Of top 3 takeaways. The first one is the trade-off. or the word trade-off, and that there's not a word for that word in Spanish. And I just was trying to think about what that meant, why there wasn't the word trade-off, and how, of course, the concept was something that Rogelio said he could explain in the culture where he grew up, but he just didn't have one word to describe it.
My question is, why not invent a word? Why not coin the word? And I didn't think about this at the time, but words get made up all the time, and no reason that you can't just start using it.
I don't know. It would probably be hard to catch on a word, even something as easy to grasp onto as trade-off.
Right.
But I was trying to think culturally why there wasn't a word for it. And I don't know the answer to it. But I also thought it was interesting when Rogelio talked about how when he's trying to tap into something emotional, he goes back to Spanish words because it's easier to find the right words that fit in Spanish than it is in English, which I think, again, is there's probably a reason that it's easier to express emotions in Spanish. I mean, Spanish is a fairly emotional language, or passionate or whatever language,
And it's often, so what this is making me think of, and you kind of alluded to it here, is the idea that language tells us what's important in a culture. Like the Inuits have 30 different words for snow, and it's because they're around snow a lot all the time.
Yeah.
And in Spanish, like you said, it's a very emotionally expressive language, and emotional expression is, I would say, is important in many, if not most, Spanish-speaking countries, and maybe a little bit less important here in the United States. So then, what that makes me wonder is, what does the absence of the word trade-off say about Spanish-speaking culture?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer, but I would love to. Feel free to let us know, native Spanish speakers who feel like they have a theory of why trade-off is not a word.
Yes, and please share with us.
I think there certainly is a reason, but I don't know exactly how to articulate it. Well, the last thing I wanted to say was just that you said in the episode that you thought you would not have been a good Zoom learner, but I actually think in some ways it might have been better for you as a learner. This was the last thing I wanted to tack on to our conversation, because it gives you some flexibility to move around and maybe learn the way that you would prefer, which is a little bit more physical. I think you could have focused more. Like you could have technically, and maybe not in every class, but you could have maybe gone on a walk or moved your computer outside, or like if you were on a laptop, moved your computer outside for a change of scenery, or stood up at your desk or stood up at the counter instead of sitting in a chair. And I think that you could have sat on a medicine ball. Medicine ball? No. You could have sat on a yoga ball. Is that what those things are? Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
those workout ball things?
You talking about these?
Yeah. You could have sat on one of those and bounced around and no one would have cared. Like there's just certain things you can do that might meet your learning needs better, that would be acceptable in an online environment that aren't acceptable in class environment.
That's true. There is this kind of unwritten code of decorum in the classroom, and you're expected to be sort of, I don't know, it's not at attention exactly, but there's a certain way of sitting and a certain way of looking that implies, hey, I'm paying respectful attention. And the standards for that are not more lax. They're just very different in the virtual environment. So maybe you're right.
Yeah. I was, my friend and I were talking this weekend, and she's picked up knitting. And I have another friend who knit during meetings, and it was really helpful for her because it was something she could do without really thinking about it, but it kept her hands moving so she wasn't bored. And but she would do it in in-person meetings, and it would annoy some people. Not so much that it would distract them. It would just annoy them that, like, what does she think she's doing knitting during a meeting? And so I was talking to my other friend this weekend about it and telling her about that.
Yeah.
And she said, well, I wouldn't knit in an in-person meeting, but I could knit in an online meeting, in a Zoom meeting, because no one can see my hands. And so she does. And so again, it's a way that she can stay focused, because if not, she's going to get bored, but it doesn't take a lot of her brain space like checking email might. And no one knows because it's in an online environment. So you have that option with, Ben, I hope you pick up knitting, but you certainly have that option with online classes that you might not with in person. Well, that's all I have. Would you like to close us with a quote?
I would love to close us with a quote. Kyle is a nit.
That is our
Ben
quote for the
Wiggins.
day.
Why do you want to shut out of your life any uneasiness, any misery, any depression, since after all, you don't know what work these conditions are doing inside you? Why do you want to persecute yourself with the question of where all this is coming from and where it is going, since you know, after all, that you are in the midst of transitions and that you wished for nothing so much as to change? If there is anything unhealthy in your reactions, just bear in mind that sickness is the means by which an organism frees itself from what is alien. So one must simply help it to be sick, to have its whole sickness and to break out with it, since that is the way it gets better. Rainer Rilke.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
An MBA from Texas A&M University can take your career to a whole new level. With full-time and weekend options, Texas A&M suits your schedule. So get a better gig. Visit mba.tamu.edu.
Looking to start a podcast? Trying to tackle questions like, how do I record? How do I edit? How can I get music for my show? What equipment do I need? How do I distribute it? Good news. The podcast architects are here to help. Whether that's from start to finish, fixing the audio quality, helping you get the episodes posted, go to podconsulting.co. Everyone has something worth sharing with the world.